People who have survived events in which others were killed. How has your life changed since? Do you have survivor's remorse? In the summer of 2012 I was taking a road trip with my family when we got T-boned by a guy going 50 miles per hour. Luckily I was sitting on the left side of the car right behind the driver's seat, but my sister and my stepmom weren't so lucky. Almost every day I see their faces right before the crash happened and the sheer terror split second before they died. I very rarely take automobiles now and only like biking or trains. I was born with cancer in the late 80s, Canada, and at the time chemo wasn't really used on kids. A European doctor came to Toronto and took 14 of us and gave us chemo. I was cancer free by the time I was 4, but only half of us walked off the floor. I'm 31 now and have 4 kids, but I often think about those poor souls who didn't make it. A relative of mine served in World War II, and apparently when he was stationed on an island base in the Pacific, fighting Japan, a Japanese plane just showed up out of nowhere and landed on the airstrip. They just kind of left it there for a few days until they decided that it probably wasn't a kamikaze, and went to confront the pilot. They found him there starving to death and chained to the cockpit. Eventually he told them that he was supposed to have been a kamikaze pilot, and that all of the propaganda about how brave and willing to die all of the kamikaze pilots were was just to cover up the fact that no kamikaze pilots were volunteers, and they were all forced to die in those planes. I met a man who survived the Korean airliner crash on Guam. He had bent down to tie his shoe at the moment the plane hit the mountain and a fireball went through the interior of the plane. He told me he felt so bad that so many had died while he had survived. At the time, I was so confused and only years later realized he suffered from survivor's guilt. Of the 254 people on board, 228 died as a result of the crash. One survivor, 36-year-old Hyun Seong Hong, also spelled Hong Hyun Sung of the United States, occupied seat 3B in first class, and said that the crash occurred so quickly that the passengers had no time to scream. That's pretty fricked up. When I was 21, I was in a tandem hang glider accident that killed my dad. Just a few seconds after takeoff from the hill, a wire came loose and the glider plummeted to the rocky hillside. He took the brunt of the impact for the both of us and died 2 days later, while I was relatively unscathed. My dad raised my brother and I on his own from the time my brother was still in diapers. I credit him for my values and my resilience in the face of misfortune. He died just as I was starting my career and finding my own way. I often miss being able to share my trials and triumphs with him, adventures, marriage, births and his grandbabies growing up. But I never once wondered why it had to happen this way. Our only thought on the subject was to imagine that he would have had it no other way. Maybe he even, in those last few seconds, did what he could to shield me from injury. He was a skilled and advanced pilot, achieving his instructor rating after almost 3 decades of enjoying the sport. He likely knew the outcome of our predicament, but I'll never know since the seconds before and after the impact are a blackout. So no, there's no guilt. That's not where my head goes for acts of pure chance, however tragic. I just miss him, sometimes terribly. And he would be so glad to know that you remember him with love and gratitude and without guilt. I'm sure that's exactly the way he would have wanted it to be. Not much of a survivor from this, but a man was killed in cold blood by a small gang of teenagers outside my apartment building. They pretty much beat him to death. This was maybe a year or 2 ago. They were my sister's classmates, and it happened around the time my dad left our building to meet me at the bus stop when I come home from uni, because it was almost 11 PM. It could have been me or him if the times had been any different or if they happened to run into either of us before. Apparently when they testified in court, one of the kids, when asked about motive, said IDK, killing is fun and something along the lines of them having thought it'd be funny. I think about that man sometimes and feel really terrible about how he died pointlessly. I was on holiday with the family, quite young at the time. We heard some noise in the hotel room next to us. Assumed some kind of couple having an argument. Didn't sound too serious, some shouting here and there but nothing weird. In the morning the police woke us up and asked us questions. Turns out the girlfriend was brutally stabbed to death. We mention it here and there to each other saying imagine if we had just checked, even once if things were okay. But you can't change the past, so shouldn't dwell on it. Such is life. If you had checked, you might have died with her. Las Vegas shooting. I actually don't have survivor's remorse, but I think I have minor PTSD from it. I feel uncomfortable in large crowds because I'll imagine gunshots going off and seeing people running everywhere in chaos. It's gotten better but still unsettling sometimes. I was on my way to school with my sister. Our driver was making a turn onto the street where our school was when a bomb went off. Everything stopped and I huddled my younger sister under me as glass exploded. It was just freaking scary because I had no idea what to do in that kind of situation. I was just 13. What's crazy is that we had stopped for gas, otherwise we wouldn't have been late. A few kids and teachers lost their lives and one happened to be a teacher I was very close with. I wasn't able to attend school there anymore. I used to get scared from the vibration of big trucks and loud pops. Even balloons, lol. I don't have survivor's guilt but always will have that morbid feeling in my stomach wondering what if we hadn't stopped for gas. Was in a boat accident with my entire family when I was 8. I wasn't injured but my sister was killed. I saw her bloody body in the arms of my grandfather and the remains of what used to be his boat. He was never the same man after that. I'm still unpacking how much it's affected my life, but I know I'll never forget the image of my dead sister. Yes, I have very real survivor's remorse, as this boat trip was the first time the whole family had been on the boat together, and my sister and I fought over sitting at the tip. I won. She died. My mom was waiting for my sister at the Boston Marathon bombing. She saw the bombs go off and as a medically trained professional, she felt that she should have gone there to help, but she also didn't know where my sister was and whether more bombs would go off. So she left and found out that my sister had only avoided being at the finish line because her period had started in the last mile of the marathon. It took them hours to get out of Boston. My mom said she could still smell the bombs and felt intense guilt for not helping and a lot of rage towards the bombers. I was swimming off a beach in Vietnam. There were a whole bunch of people. I was on the edge of the group further out. There was another guy, maybe 50 years old, maybe 5 feet further out than me. Strong current swept me and the older guy out even further away from the group. In a slight panic, I started swimming and made it back okay. The older guy did not. I remember making it back to the shore and the lifeguard on duty was being yelled at by other people to go save the old guy. The lifeguard froze up and it was several minutes before he swam out there and pulled the guy back in. The old guy was limp and they didn't even try CPR. They just loaded him up on an ATV and drove him off. I think about it and wonder every now and then if I could have saved him. But not being a great swimmer or trained rescuer, I probably would have died too if I tried. I got caught in a rip current once and didn't realize until I was getting tired and not actually moving towards shore. Basically doing everything you shouldn't. Some guy noticed and told me to swim towards him. Parallel. Once I got out of it, I was fine. Luckily, it wasn't a very strong one, but scared the crap out of me. I got caught in a pile-up stampede once. It happened after an outdoor event at night. It was freezing cold and many people tried to leave as soon as the event was over. There was a bottleneck at one exit, and people got crushed. If I recall correctly, 5 dead, many injured. I recall being in a sea of people, unable to move. I got lifted off my feet and got pushed around with the crowd, completely unable to do anything about it. It was kinda fun at first, but soon everyone realized that it was super freaking serious. Then the collapse began. It was like a fracture line with a subduction zone. Simply put, like many others, I got pinned under, on top of some girls and a bunch of people on my back. The girl stated to panic and began hyperventilating. I myself was pretty dang stoned, which in retrospect absolutely helped me to stay calm. I instructed her to breathe slowly, in, out, and reassured her that everything would be alright. Total lizard brain survival mode. Quench the panic. Stay calm. I didn't believe it myself though. She eventually calmed down, and after what seemed ages, an hour 15 minutes, the pressure from the crowd declined. She got out unharmed. I got up, but many people didn't. As I was getting on my feet, I noticed the carnage. Bent, crumpled, bloody. Emergency response personnel was already there, and I just walked up to the nearest EMT who was reanimating a girl, just a few meters away from where I was pinned. We performed CPR on her. She was foaming blood from her mouth from her internal injuries. As I was talking to the EMT, her blood ran from his mouth. After a while someone else took over performing chest compressions. I got up and grabbed a lone shoe that I somehow thought a friend had lost. He in fact did, and it was his shoe, and got the heck away from there. This was before mobile phones, but miraculously the people I was with all managed to meet up outside the venue. No one from our group got injured. Apparently an EMT thanked an unknown helper on TV a few days after. As for how it changed me, I avoided crowds for some time. But that's mostly about it. I debated if I was part of what caused the stampede. Yes, probably you're not stuck in traffic. You are traffic. But so were hundreds if not thousands of others. It was freezing and the event was over. We were using the designated exit of our sector, and after several years of legal proceedings, the organizers were found guilty of negligence. I don't think I've had any sorts of survivor's guilt. In fact, I only learned that that was a thing several years after. The only thing that's sometimes on my mind is the question if I could have done more to help the people that were injured. Man, this is a weird memory to have brought up on a Monday morning. I was in a head-on collision in which a drunk driver hit me and another car in the lane next to mine. The 82-year-old lady in the other car died the next day due to her injuries. When she was pulled from the car, one of her legs looked badly twisted and broken. But other than that, she looked much younger and in good shape, so I figured she'd be fine. I walked away with only some scratches from glass in my face, and some soreness. The drunk driver was taken away on a stretcher, but she survived and is in jail now. I felt terrible for the lady who was killed. I didn't find out till a day or two later when a police officer called to get my statement. I didn't feel survivor's guilt, because it had nothing to do with me, and I just felt lucky to be alive. I was 41 years old and getting married a few months later. The daughter of the lady who was killed contacted me a few years later, just to hear firsthand what happened that morning. I felt terrible for her and her family, especially since I lost my own mom and dad within 2 years after that accident. But I didn't feel guilty, just sad. Of all the ways to die or kill someone, drunk driving is so easy to avoid that it just becomes so senseless. This may not be exactly what you're looking for, but my brother ended his life this last November, and the situations and factors that largely contributed to his choice were things that I lived through or currently work through every day. The only thing I could think that morning when my mom called to tell me was that I know exactly how he felt in every moment before that night that he considered ending his life, and how he felt moments before he did. I never told him I knew what it felt like to take the emotional abuse from our father, how I knew what it was like to live with the emotional instability that seems to run in our family that no one other than me would ever admit. I never told him I knew what it was like to shake with rage, to be drowning in it, for that fury inside me and the person I am to be unrecognizable. I never told him how many times the only thing I wanted was to die. I never told him what helped me to be better, and I never told him how different life could be once you get out, live your own life. So while everyone else cried and asked how could he do this, why did he do this, I lived with knowing exactly how he felt, and feeling like my voice could have been of the only ones to actually make a difference. So at the end of the day I got out alive, and he didn't. When I was 14 my brother, sister, and I were in a lethal car accident on Christmas morning. My sister was driving. Brother was shotgun. I was in the back. In the other car there was a young couple who had gotten married about 3 months prior. They had 2 dogs with them. They were at fault in it. The interstate roads were icy and they had their cruise control on going 75. We were coming the opposite way going 70. Just before an overpass they lost control, bounced a few times between the rails, then came over the median into our lane and we T-boned them on the driver's side. If my sister hadn't steered into the median we all would have gone over the overpass. The husband in the other car died on impact. We all have some level of survivor's remorse. Most of all my sister. It's affected us quite a bit. I've always had severe driving anxiety. We avoid car travel on the holidays. It rattles me less as I get older but it really shook me for several years. It's hard to break through, but I would remind your sister daily that her quick reaction saved your life, as well as your brother's. She did the best she could in a very quick and unexpected situation. I'm 33 now, but when I was 9 I saw a 3-year-old boy that I didn't know drown at a super crowded pool. My sister was with me and they were the same age. I had a hard time with it. I remember feeling like I could have prevented it if I wasn't playing and I was paying better attention. I couldn't get over thinking it could have been her. I started sleepwalking, lots of anxiety, and became super overprotective of my sister. I just felt so guilty that I was playing while that boy died. I really think that's when I stopped being a child. I was seriously overprotective. We were homeschooled on a farm in the middle of nowhere, so I knew exactly where she was and what she was doing all day every day. I didn't go places without her. I got really freaked out in crowds. My world became so small and centered around her. My parents were checked out. They were more than happy to just let me be her parent. It wasn't until I went to college the next town over that I got my own life. The anxiety still pops up randomly, like when she had a baby. It took me a few days to bond with my nephew because I was so worried about her. She is a champ. Baby out 3 pushes absolutely no reason for me to be freaked out. But then the safety anxieties around her never went away and it's now moved on to the next generation. I'm an expert at baby proofing. You are a loving person. I do have survivor's remorse. 13 years ago, I was running errands with my mom and my little brother. My brother, who was 17 at the time, had just got his first job in the cafeteria of our local hospital. He just needed to complete his pre-employment drug screen. We stopped by the clinic first thing to get it out of the way. After waiting for a bit I went back to my car because I wasn't feeling well. I was a few weeks pregnant with my son and had awful morning sickness. While I was in the car I saw a truck come speeding through the parking lot towards the clinic. I thought, wow, they're going too fast to take the turn, and they were. The truck hopped the curb and slammed through the clinic's window at the end of the little road. My mom and my brother were sitting right where the truck hit. They died an awful, painful death and I nearly did too. I feel so guilty for not being with them. It's taken years, but I have realized that my mom and brother wouldn't be angry or upset that they died and I didn't. I miss them so much. I'm so sorry you had to witness this event. I know it won't magically fix everything, but you got your unborn son to safety. Hold him so tight. Hit by car at 50 miles per hour. Ironically, the girl in the car died from all of the glass and I only needed a few months to recover. Being 6 months, still can stop thinking about her. No one died, but my brother got into a fight that turned into a knife fight. He got slashed pretty bad. I managed to get there with a bat. Dude takes off. Walk over to my brother who is laying on the street all bloodied up. Thought my brother wasn't going to make it. Now I try to avoid violence if at all possible because you never know who has a knife or a gun. And if a fight is inevitable, I'm prepared to do to the worse. Craps like that in my country. Shaved heads, tracksuits and all wet. They weigh 40 kgs. They can't fight for crap, but most of them are ready to stab you over anything or kick you in the head while you are down. I was visiting a friend at her apartment, and we decided we wanted to go get ice cream. We hadn't even walked 5 minutes away from the complex when a jet, we live between 2 naval bases, crashes right on top of her apartment complex. Luckily none of her family was home, but a lot of people, including the pilot, died that day or were badly injured. Sometimes I imagine, what if we didn't want to get ice cream? What if we just started watching that movie we were planning to first? Not me, but my great aunt that lived in the Philippines during World War II. She was in a safe space with her baby and child, watching through a slit underground and seeing her neighbors raped and killed and such. The Japanese soldiers killed babies in front of mothers right before their eyes. She used to cry, wondering and thankful she was the lucky one that got to keep her baby and young daughter, but guilty she watched everyone else around her die and such. She died recently though. Probably not as dramatic as you're looking for, but in my early 20s I got involved in suicide prevention. Contrary to popular belief, you can end up with survivor's guilt without having been in danger yourself. I know exactly what you mean. Just the thought of if you could have made a difference had you been there or been able to help is enough to trigger survivor's remorse. When I originally finished treatment and everyone was all, yeah, you beat cancer, I felt horribly guilty and honestly was struggling with how to deal with living with that guilt for the rest of my life. But the cancer came back, so no more guilt for me. Not me, but my uncle. There was a major accident on the Garden State Parkway, NJ, where a dump truck went over the barrier into oncoming traffic. My uncle had just switched lanes with the guy who got hit by the dump truck just moments prior to the crash. He tried pulling him out of his car, but the poor dude was already gone. He didn't sleep well for a while after that. We all told him to go to therapy, but I don't know if he ever did. When I was a kid, I had moved from Louisiana to Las Vegas when I was around 5, I think. It was no big deal for me at the time, and I don't know if it was to my mom or family either, but turns out it was a couple weeks before Katrina hit. I didn't think about the significance of it until I was old enough to understand how many lives were lost or destroyed. Kinda strange, getting chills thinking about it right now. Makes me appreciate the Nation Guard and volunteers a ton more. I was in Ramadi, Iraq in 2006 to 2007. We lost something like 90 people in our task force. Obviously, I only knew a small percentage personally, but on the plane home I remember being really struck with the fact that there were fewer people on the plane home than on the plane over there. It was just an image, empty seats, but it stuck. I did a lot of questioning, a lot of why them and not me. It gets better over time, but looking at the dates on this post, and realizing that it's been 12 years since I came home, I guess that over time and better are pretty subjective. Not so much did I survive an event where others died, but I was with my best friend the night before he committed suicide, and also with my brother the night before he committed suicide 8 months later. The night with my best friend, our conversation centered around the fact that he attempted and failed the night before. We talked for 4 or 5 hours and he seemed like he was going to be okay. I told him to come over the next day when he woke up. He said he would, but the way he left and said goodbye, I should have known I wouldn't see him the next day. Me and my brother had a long talk about depression the night before his. Both of us suffered from it. Mine in the past and his ongoing. Seemed like any other conversation until the next day when we couldn't find him. Sometimes I think I could have stopped them. Other times I know I couldn't have. All in all, it makes you feel bad inside knowing that there is always more you could have done and that what you said just wasn't enough for them to want to remain here. I know it's off topic, but it's still remorse and guilt associated with death. I watched my best friend get blown up. I absolutely have survivor's guilt. But I do exactly what he would want. I try to be the best me I can each and every day. The strength he had. Give me strength today. If I didn't give every day my best, I would be disappointing him, and I'm not okay with that. Until Valhalla. Watched a dude jump off a building. It's kind of hard to say how it changed my life since I was so young when it happened, but it definitely left me with a sense of existential dread and flashbacks. I almost killed a kid. I was driving a truck in South Korea, a big LMTV. Think 18-wheeler size. The streets were so narrow in this city between Camp Red Cloud and Camp Casey, so I'm doing the best as a new first-year private at 22. I see a blue puffy jacket run into the street just in front of my tire, which are massive. Think tractor tires. The LMTV has air brakes and I pushed them so hard I'm pretty sure I twisted something. But my adrenaline pushed through and I sat in silence, not knowing if I had killed this little kid or not. She couldn't had been more than 3. After what seemed like 5 minutes, I yelled at my sergeant to check because I just couldn't move. He got out just as the mom came running up and takes the kid, looking angrily at me and him. I still clam up or stop my car fully when I see anyone beside a road, more so kids. I drive a very tiny car so I can see everything and check my blind spots religiously. I almost ended a kid's life for nothing. All kids are suicide machines until they are old enough to know better. You didn't do anything wrong. Parents should have had a closer watch on them. I don't expect anyone to see this, but when I was 9 I was involved in an accident at an amusement park. A 6-year-old boy, who coincidentally lived 2 blocks over from me at the time, died. While we were disembarking, another person entered the loading area, leaned against the control panel, and pressed the go button. The boy next to me was knocked down and crushed under gigantic wheels. I managed to press myself against the fence containing the ride and was just barely missed. The girl operating the ride managed to snag the kid she was helping and get back to the panel to turn off the ride, but it was a mess. You know how rides have keys to operate now? I'm pretty sure this accident is a major part of why that happened. I'll be honest, I barely think about it, only when a question like this pops up. It was my first experience with a psychologist and I suppose it helped me, but I also was diagnosed with depression in high school and part of that is I have very few memories of my life. I know things happened, but I don't remember them happening, if that makes sense. So I don't remember this event really, just flashes of what happened after. Going up to the top of the ride and looking down and seeing blood smeared where they tried to wipe it up. Only going on the kiddie rides and the wooden roller coaster for the rest of the day. My mom scolding me for leaving my friend back at the ride before she knew what happened. In a way it's nice I don't remember, because it doesn't haunt me, but at the same time, I have no idea if it shaped me. It feels like it should have, but I don't know. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.